Happy EEKtober, everybody. We are doing 31 days of scary movies, and today is day 13. I am your host, Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker, and my topic is something that I call Take the Doughnut, which is another way to say Carpe Diem. And that comes from this strange thing that happened to me in college where I left an actual donut on a table. And that became an object lesson for me and what it looks like to leave opportunities behind. So I don't want to do that anymore. I want to take the donut. Now, from time to time, I'll issue myself a Take the Doughnut challenge, which is a way for me to say, this is something that I want to go after. I'll make it official. And then I'll use that to hold myself accountable to it. But this time, I'm actually opening this one up to anybody who wants to join. So here we are for 31 days of scary movies. Today, of course, being day 13, we are watching Funny Games. This is the 2007 version. It's a psychological or stalker film. You could put it in home invasion if you wanted to. There's often overlap between subgenres for these movies. This was directed and written by Michael Haneke. This one stars Naomi Watts as Anne, Tim Roth as George, Michael Pitt as Paul, and Brady Corbett as Peter. And here's what you need to know about this one. I keep saying this one is because this is actually a shot-for-shot remake. Michael Haneke did a 1997 Austrian version of this film, and this is a shot-for-shot remake in English with actors who would maybe more likely appeal to an American market. So it's not different, but it is just meant to have all the components that would work better for another audience. So that's the basic detail of this that you need to know up front. And here are, a few of the things that I wanted to say about this before I get into any of the details of the scenes. First of all, I think that this has just sort of like an unrelenting feeling to it. I think if you were to put this in something like a home invasion category, a lot of the times with home invasion films, you have like a little bit more time up front to breathe. You might have a bit more of a cat and mouse game happening. You usually have more time where the person being stalked or the person being hunted is not in the presence of or like directly in the face of the person who is hunting or stalking them. And this one kind of flies in the face of all of that. And the people who are dangerous are with the people who are in danger almost the entire film. And they have to maintain sort of the tension of that situation for the whole film. So it is a slightly different exercise than your average home invasion film, which is why I put this into like stalker or psychologicals, because they have to play with some very different ways of getting into the story and building the tension for us as viewers. And they, by the way, are very, very aware of us as viewers. This film breaks the fourth wall. One character breaks the fourth wall 3 different times in this film. It's a very self-aware film, and it wants to be a message film. I think that is clear in the way they're doing it, especially with the way they break the fourth wall. They're constantly inviting us to witness the violence. They're testing us to say, we want to see the violence. They're saying, you don't really want to see this, do you? But they know that we do because we're still watching the movie. So it's really sort of teasing the audience, and it's making a statement about like public consumption of violence through the movie where they're nodding to you, the audience. So look, you can say you like that or that you don't like that. This is a film that has polarizing views on it. I would say there are people who think there's never a good reason to break the fourth wall, I think, and there are people who don't stand for that in this film, and there are people who do. I do. I see the reason for what they're doing here. I feel very angry for the whole film. These people make me furious. Peter and Paul, that is. And so like it's effective in creating emotion in me, which a lot of times horror movies, like I have to really hunt for that because they don't typically make me feel scared. So the first time I saw this film and I came away feeling like, even in the middle, I was like, oh, I was so furious with them. And it was like, okay, so this film is doing something for sure. And some people don't like what it did. And the question is, what do you think about it? So One other thing I want to point out here is that this movie really endeavors to make you uncomfortable in every possible way. And one of the ways that they do that is audio. Speaking levels are incredibly low. And when it gets really loud is when they blast metal music in your ears. So there's like no level that you can put this at that will make it comfortable for you. And only on a rewatch do you even know when those loud music moments are coming to know if you need to like manage your audio level at some point. So it is, especially on a first watch, inherently going to be an extremely uncomfortable experience. And that is by design. Like, they want you uncomfortable. And then if you got all the way through this film, you were the one they were speaking to every time they broke the fourth wall. So okay, so that's the basics of this film that I wanted to share. Like, going through the scenes, it's interesting because when I've been doing that for some of these films, I don't always find myself writing down all the dialogue. But in the beginning, especially, I was doing that with this film because that's the only way that they can build the tension. And the delivery of that dialogue is incredibly important to how it comes across and how the tone shifts as we go through. But, if I summarize these scenes, it's like Peter asks for eggs. Moving on, like it doesn't sound like much. And so it's the fact that we have to linger with uncomfortable feelings as all of this stuff is happening that really is the effect of the film. So, the beginning of this film, we are going to start with silent credits. We've got the blood red writing over the black background. We've got opera music playing. There's an aerial shot over a road where we're going to see a car that's towing a boat. And they're playing a game in the car. So as much as Peter and Paul like to play games, they're playing a game. This family is playing a game at the start of the movie. They're guessing their music selection. This is exactly the kind of thing Peter and Paul would love. They found the right family. So I guess on road trips, they each pick songs and the others have to guess which ones they picked. They look for things that are really obscure. But we start with opera selections. Maybe that's all they listen to. For a while, we don't see their faces even. They're switching music. We're hearing their voices as they're making guesses. We're going to see as the car drives into sort of like more remote areas. They have a house on a lake. So we're getting into like tree lined, one lane in each direction roads. We're going to start seeing this lake. And now we're going to see them. There's a mom, there's a dad, and they have a son. And we're going to get to know them as we go through as Anne and George and Georgie, the son, who I think really is just George. And Paul takes it upon himself to call this kid Georgie. And so once we've sort of set this up with them playing the game, we are going to get the funny games credits, just funny games in really big letters. And now all we can hear, we're not hearing opera anymore. All we can hear is the loudest metal music, Bonehead, Naked City. It is absolutely blasting over this same scene. We can't hear what they're saying anymore, but they're smiling with each other. And we're hearing really uncomfortable, angry music, and they're smiling and doing a game to opera music. And it's just so cacophonous and disruptive. And right out of the gate, you are meant to feel uncomfortable. You are meant to be like holding your ears, like checking if your neighbors are okay. So it's like right away, you know that this movie is going to play with you. The music then stops entirely when we hear them honk their horn at their neighbors. So they're getting closer to their house, their next door neighbor. They get up to their gate and they're going to see them, and they're supposed to they're meeting up with them the next day at 10 a.m. And so they call out to their neighbors. They've got the man and the woman, the husband and the wife. There are two boys standing there with them that this family doesn't recognize. And it looks like a very uncomfortable scene that by the end of this film, we know exactly what's happening with this family or with this couple. But Anne and George don't know. So they're going to see, as they drive up and try to speak to the couple, you see the boys kind of go, one of them goes closer to the man to probably give him instructions. And they're going to confirm still on for 10 tomorrow. Yeah, sure. They say, give us a hand with launching the boat in 20 minutes. And Uncle Fred's going to say, yeah, absolutely. I'll be there. Probably at the okay of Paul. So now they're driving away. Anne's like, well, that was weird, wasn't it? What happened with the wife? She said nothing. And who were those guys? Maybe relatives? So they don't know, but they're not too worried about it. They're going to get to their house, summer house, I guess. And they get to a gated driveway. There's a big gate. They have to open the gate. They get home. The dog's exploring the home. They're getting everything set up. The camera's going to stay downstairs while Anne goes upstairs because we need to like not always be getting all the information. You know, the audience can't always know what's happening here. The dog's barking. And neighbor, Uncle Fred, and Paul are at the gate. So we're going to get some introductions for Paul. Apparently, Paul's father is a business associate. That's what Uncle Fred says anyway. Paul is all in white shirt, white shorts, white shoes, white gloves. The dog won't stop barking. The dog hates Paul. And Anne's going to meet Paul. And then all the men are going to help with the boat. They get it set up. And then George and Georgie are going to stay behind to finish things up. Georgie's not really sure where his friend is. I saw the mom and the dad, but where's the kid? And why was Uncle Fred behaving so strangely? So Anne starts prepping dinner. She's got one side of the sink full with water so she can wash some lettuce. She's on the phone. She's inviting somebody to come over for the weekend and seems like that's a go. Anne is going to give Georgie a knife for some task on the boat. But then Georgie's supposed to leave and go back to the boat, but he just ends up looking at the door kind of skeptically. He's like, there's someone here. And he looks a little unsettled. There is, in fact, a gate that this guy would have had to get past to get onto the property. So there's now another kid, a kid that wasn't the person that was just introduced as Paul. This is going to be Peter, although I don't know that we get his name right away. So he's got a white shirt, also the white shoes, but he's got black shorts, and then he's got the white gloves. What's up with their white gloves, you might think? He is very polite. You know, the deal with these two is that they are ultra polite, and then it takes a turn. And very rarely are they not sounding like very polite in their language, but we can feel when it turns. So Peter's saying, sorry to disturb. I'm just staying next door. Mrs. Thompson ran out of eggs, asked if you had any. And so Anne's like, okay, fine. How many did you need? He says 4. She's like, what for? He's like, I have no idea. No clue. So Anne says, how did you get in here? He says, well, the lake. She's like, you're not wet. He says, well, there was a hole in the fence. This is already starting to not add up for Anne. Anne's smart enough. She starts to clue in really early in the film that things are amiss and it doesn't even matter, which is ultra scary. It's like, oh my God, there's nothing that these people can do. So he's going to take the eggs, gets to the door, he drops them all. We know he's dropping them on purpose. He's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy. I have 2 left hands. She comes over, she cleans it up. He's lingering, still apologizing. She takes a while. We're watching her for a while clean up these eggs and pushing the yolks around. She finally scoops it all up. She's going to throw it out. He's like, I'm so clumsy. I'm so sorry again. He just gestures to the fridge. He still needs 4 eggs. She's like, yeah, I have people coming over. They do eat eggs. I don't have more to spare. He's like, yeah, but there were 8 left. So you'd still have 4. And she's like, right. So she's going to go to the fridge. She's going to get him more eggs. She's like, do you need the carton? He's like, no, not really. She's like, you sure? He's like, well, if you insist. She's like, if I insist? So now she goes to grab the carton and he just whoop drops the phone into the water that she's been using to wash the lettuce. And the way it's done, because I know I've seen this movie before, so I know at this point that he's doing it on purpose. But actually, if you watch this, we can't, his back is to the camera, so we can't see his face, and you could think he did it by accident. It's done in such a way that it could not be on purpose. And so he's now dropped her phone in the water to make sure that she can't make calls. And she's like, oh my goodness. Okay, this guy's a nuisance. She's like, you know what? Just so we don't have more accidents, just take the eggs and leave. He's like, yeah, the carton. She starts to get annoyed. He's like, I'm sorry. I'll tell Mrs. Thompson how nice you were. He leaves, we think, but he doesn't really. She thinks he left. So she's going to turn on the radio. She's going to smoke. She's making like there's nobody else in the house. The dog starts to bark. The dog starts to growl. She goes to the front door, which is on the other side of the kitchen, of the kitchen wall. And she sees that the dog is outside barking at two people inside. It's the guy who hasn't even introduced himself, Peter, and Paul. Peter was supposed to leave. Now there's a second person here. And neither of them were invited into the home. So she's like, yeah, sorry, the dog wants to play. Peter's like, it's a strange way to play. Paul says, yeah, Peter's afraid of dogs. She's like, should I lock them up so you can leave? Like, oh, if that's what's preventing you from going, I'll fix that up right quick. Paul says, not necessary. Ooh. Paul is amazed at her golf clubs. I mean, by now, most humans would understand to leave. Like, it's uncomfortable. They're not welcome there. You were never invited in. Like, this is obviously not a normal situation. These two are not reading her social cues. And she is getting more and more direct. Paul is amazed at the golf clubs. Peter's smiling and laughing at it. Anne's very uncomfortable at this point. And Paul says, like, I would love to swing. Can I go outside and swing one? I won't swing it towards the house, I promise. Peter's going to stay. We hear the dog barking a lot. George and Georgie are on the boat hearing this. They're like, what's wrong with the dog? And then all of a sudden, the dog yelps and stops barking altogether. George is like, okay, I'll check this out. Leaves the knife on the boat, probably not the best move. Anne is going to go to check what happened with the dog. Paul's outside. He's like, club's great. Love the club. That was awesome. Anne's going to take it from him. Paul's like, where's Tom? Did you give him the eggs? So we haven't been introduced yet to Peter, but Paul sometimes calls him Tom for reasons unknown. They're going to go inside the house, Paul and Anne. Paul goes in ahead of her, even though it's not his house, and he was never invited in. Paul lets Peter know how good the club was. He's like, you have to try it. Anne says to both of them, look, I don't know what game you're playing. And she gets here pretty fast. Like, I would probably not have let these people in to begin with at all. She got here pretty quickly. She's like, I don't know what kind of game you're playing. I don't want to be a part of it. Please leave now. They look at each other and they're like, Paul says, what game? I don't understand why you're suddenly being so unfriendly. Did we do something? Anne's like, no, please leave. Paul says, Peter, the guy he's called Tom now, he's like, did you misbehave while I was outside? Was he rude? Anne says, stop it. I see what you're doing. Like, just stop it. I would like you to go. She's going to open the door and stand there for them to go out. Paul says, I don't understand, but if you insist, just give Tom the eggs and we'll go. She's like, excuse me? Paul says, honestly, like, I look, nothing like this has ever happened to me before. Just give us the eggs and we'll go. She's like, no, you'll just go. Please go. Peter's like, did I do something wrong? Anne has had enough of these two. She grabs Peter by the shirt and she walks him towards the door. She says, I asked you to leave. At this point, George is going to come in. Anne's complaining to him. She's alarmed at these intruders. Paul's like, look, I just want some help maybe figuring out what this misunderstanding is. Anne's like, back me up here, George. He's like, why are you being so rude? She's like, I have my reasons. Like, George is like, okay, well, then please leave. Peter is going to come. He's going to take the eggs. She's just like, take all the eggs, just go, get out the door. But she gives them to George instead of to the guys. So she's like, you deal with this. And George now has the eggs and he's deciding kind of like what to do because it's just become this issue of his wife or these two strangers. And George is like, okay, wait, what's going on here? Hard to know what's happening, actually. Paul's like, okay, so here's the deal. Well, you asked for the eggs, you got 4, and then you drop them, and then this time, and then you dropped them. And they're like going through the whole thing with the eggs. George, they're getting a little bit more forceful about it. George is like, watch your tongue, young man. Paul says, watch yours, old man, or I'll break your eggs. So this is the first time. It's actually, especially in the beginning, it's rare that we hear something actively threatening, because most of the time it's just the fact that they're continuing to mess with these people that's ominous. So George slaps him and asks him to go, not giving him the eggs. Peter is then going to grab a club and hit his leg and pretty much injure him for the rest of this movie. Georgie's going to try to fight. They restrain him. Anne comes in and sees all this, hoping that George was going to take care of it, but this is a worse situation than when she left it. Georgie runs to her. The boys are like, okay, like, we'll let you help George. Let's get him a chair. Peter says, sorry. So best thing you could do here is take your pants off so I can see your wound. He says this to George. George is thinking, nope, I'm not stripping for you. Peter said, just if I can help you, all you have to do, I'm being very reasonable here, just take off your pants, let me help. Paul says, I mean, look, you are the captain here. Totally up to you. Do you want to call somebody? The police, maybe? We're not going to stop you. Sounding very generous, very magnanimous. Anne says, yeah, he dropped the cell phone in the sink. George says, okay, why are you doing this? Paul's like, why not? How about this? We'll play another game. What's this? He holds up the golf ball. He says, why do I have it? Anybody? Why do I have it? Peter smiles. He knows this game. This is a fun game. Peter's like, because you didn't hit it. Paul says, correct. I tested the club another way. Anne knows exactly what this means. This probably has something to do with the fact that their dog stopped barking. So she's going to go out. She's going to check for the dog, and we're going to play warmer, colder with Paul outside. She's going to look for this dog, and he's going to keep telling her whether she's warmer or colder. And if this is the first time that he breaks the fourth wall, he smiles directly at us because he's enjoying the game so much. And here we are still watching this film. We already know what's happening in this film. And he's like, this is a game for you too, isn't it? So she gets further and further away. She gets to the car. He says she's really warm. She opens the hatchback and the dog tumbles out. I imagine there are a bunch of people who stop watching the film right around here. If you don't like violence against animals, we didn't see anything. This is very likely a fake dog that we're looking at, but the implication is certainly there. Peter is inside the house guarding George on the chair in the hallway. He says, could you possibly get me something to eat? He says this to Georgie, who's right next to George. Maybe bananas. Just no knife. Don't get a knife, or I'd be sorry. For you, I mean. Georgie's going to get him something to eat, little snack. We're going to get some neighbors shouting to Anne while she's still outside. So some people just pulled in for the summer. people are arriving, they're staggering arrivals. And so these people either have been there or they're just arriving and they saw that Anne and George are here. So they're coming up to say hello. Paul is going to stay with Anne to make sure she stays on her very best behavior. We're going to meet these people as Betsy and Robert. They sail up to say hello. They come up to Anne's dock and you're thinking, oh, stay on the boat. They tie up. Anne is going to introduce Paul. She says something about the Thompsons. So it doesn't even matter. He has his gloves on and they comment about this. And he's like, I have eczema. Anne is going to lie about George and say he's resting. They say, okay, well, how about we swing by later? Let's confirm it. Paul is going to interrupt all of this by saying very awkwardly, where's your dock? And Betsy answers the question. She tells them exactly where they live. Anne's like, oh no. And then he's going to get clarification. Oh, you mean the house over here? Just, yeah, that's the one. Just great. And they're going to leave. And they just sign their own death certificates, pretty much is what happened just now. Okay, so Anne goes back with Paul and she says, those neighbors are coming by in a couple hours. They go into the house. Paul says, did I misunderstand? Because I heard that they were going to call to confirm. Anne says they'll come whether or not they reach us. So the family is going to move George into the living room. Peter says, look, be open with us. We're being open with you. I mean, the politeness is infuriating. It's such a mismatch for how they're being. It's so painful to watch. Paul and Peter, we want to help. We just don't want to impose in terms of like getting George to a comfortable position. Anne says, please stop. Paul says, oh, you're asking. Anne's going to go to the next room to get something. Peter stops Georgie from following her. Paul apologizes. He says, look, George, a slap in the face, because George had slapped Paul in the face earlier when he had said something about young man and we had the old man retort. So he's like, look, a slap in the face though, it just wasn't called for. So, but it's okay. Let's put it behind us. Paul reaches out to shake George's hand. George will not. He says, look, I'm Paul. This is Peter. Come on, shake Tom's hand, or Tom, shake the man's hand. And Peter, Tom, he goes to shake George's hand. George will not do it. Anne is going to come in with water and some sort of pain med. And Paul physically pushes her into George's leg to hurt George's leg. And then Peter starts repeatedly stepping on George's leg on the couch. So just, we're creating like just this crescendo of noise and shouts that feels really uncomfortable to listen to. So Paul's going to hit Anne, and now Anne and George are just crying on the sofa. Paul's going to restrain Georgie. He says, so much stress for a polite mistake. Paul and Peter are now going to sit across from the family on the sofa. Paul's like, we're just trying to be friendly. Georgie says, why are you doing this? Peter says, I don't know, Paul, like, would you? Paul says, oh, well, the captain wants to know why. Tell him. Peter says, you know how hard this is for me. And so now they're going to make up a whole story. Paul rolls his eyes. He says his father divorced his mother when he was this big for another woman. Peter's crying. He says, my mom got divorced because, Paul finishes, he says, because she wanted her little teddy bear all to herself, which is why he's gay and a criminal. He's white trash. He's a deprived family and an alcoholic father. And, we're going through all of this, and Peter's crying. The family's afraid, and they're making the whole thing up. This is just a show. And so they start to use foul language. George says, watch your language in front of my kid. Paul says, I hear you. What would make you happy? I mean, honestly, nothing I said was true. Peter and Paul are both laughing with each other. Paul's like, do you want another version? I can make that happen for you. Peter goes to get another snack. He's just making the kitchen like his own kitchen. Paul says, truth is, he's a drug addict. going to get a fix now. I'm a drug addict too. We rob homes to support our habit. That's why we're doing this. George says, I get it. Enough. Paul shouts to Peter in the kitchen. He's like, Tubby, he gets it. Do you hear that? He gets it. Let's make a bet now. Peter's going to come back in with some sort of snack. Paul says, okay, here's the bet. In 12 hours, all three of you will be kaput. Anne says, what? Paul says, let's bet on it. The family looks exhausted. Peter's like, they don't want to bet. Paul says, well, that's not an option. There has to be a bet. He's going to break the fourth wall again. He's going to look directly at us and he's going to say, what do you think? Think they stand a chance? You're on their side. Who are you betting on? Paul looks back to the situation at hand. So we're being held hostage, he's trying to show us, just like the family themselves. Peter is a little confused about the bet. Paul's like, yes, they're going to lose either way. You've got it. George says, just take what you want and go. Just go. Fred's going to come here. He's going to see all of this. They're like, nah. Sorry, man. Fred's not a factor. Paul says, all right, the bet is on. Let's make a deal. Peter says to Anne, would you be so kind as to make us something to eat? This man keeps eating. Paul says, control yourself. He keeps using the nickname Tubby. They're going to bicker a bunch. Paul says, okay, so like, look, in terms of just eating too much, he's saying to Peter, do you think the captain's wife thinks you're hot? Like, she probably would if not for your body. He pokes at his slab. Peter laughs a little bit. Paul's like, I mean, look, she has a well-toned body. Peter's not so sure about it. Paul's like, what? Look how rude. Are you going to take that? Are we going to take that? Anne gets up to go. They're going to address Georgie. They want to play a game with him. And Anne tells them to leave the boy alone. The game is cat in a bag, which is just putting a sack over Georgie's head and pulling it tight so he screams. And now making the parents worried for their kid. And Georgie's trying to attack, but he just sits there until Georgie stops. And the game is, Anne just has to take off her clothes. That's the game. They want to see if she has jelly rolls. It's a lingering, like we're getting to a point in the movie where things linger for more and more time. So at this point, it's just really uncomfortable. We're looking at her face. She's already feeling humiliated, but they've got their kid. So, okay. So George is like, I guess you have to do it. So Anne is going to very slowly disrobe. She's crying. She's feeling violated. Paul says, bravo, no jelly rolls, get dressed again. She's like, she puts on her underwear. She's going to spend a long time from here on in her underwear. Georgie wet himself. And so Paul's going to give Georgie to Peter to take care of the situation. George tries to attack. It's like, okay, if there's a handover happening, maybe this is a rare moment of opportunity. George tries to attack. Georgie is going to get away. He is really uncertain where to go. He moves like he's going to go out the front door, but that would be too obvious. So instead, he goes out up to the second floor. He goes to the balcony. He's going to climb down the trellis, so he's on the other side of the house. Paul and Peter need to deal with that situation, so they're going to tie George and Anne down. Paul goes to look for Georgie, who is currently climbing the driveway gate, and then he runs. Peter is going to put George in a chair, and he's like, why don't you just kill us? Peter says, well, you shouldn't forget the importance of entertainment. You know, I mean, again, it's a message movie. Got to get that message out to you. Georgie's wading through some water and he goes to Uncle Fred's house. There's automatic yard lights that come on when it senses his motion. And that's unfortunate, but doesn't really matter because Paul's already following him. And so Georgie is going to run to the house and go in, and he's trying to hide in the house. Peter's going to cover, and he's like, think about it, all this just for a carton of eggs. Like, shame on you for behaving badly, even though really, what do they do? Like, this was always going to happen. Peter leaves the room, and Anne's going to get up, and George is going to try to help her free her hands. So Peter comes in and he sees all this happening. He's like, I don't understand. You're practically forcing me to treat you badly. He drops the rest of the eggs on the carpet. He's like, now you've really done it. Paul specifically said we needed to watch out for the carpet. Anne says, let us go. You're still so young. Nothing's happened yet. Peter's like, please don't do this. You're degrading yourself. Georgie has been sort of running through the house and hiding, but he sees he's been leaving water marks on the floor because he just walked through the lake. So he takes off his shoes and his socks and his pants. He's going to try to leave less of a trail. The automatic light comes on the balcony where he is. He hears Paul. So he's going to hide in another room. He sees a dead body in the house. So yeah, everybody, that's why he didn't see his friend earlier. He's going to run. He gets a gun. He finds a gun in the house, a rifle. So Paul is going to play the game of just play really loud music in the house. The metal music that we heard at the beginning of the film, we're going to hear it again here. And it's so loud that Georgie can't hear Paul's movements. So when Georgie runs to the next room, Paul's there. Georgie pulls the gun on him. Paul's like, cock the gun. He's walking closer to Georgie. He says, pull the trigger. And just when you're like, I don't know if this kid has the stomach to do that, he does pull the trigger, but the gun wasn't loaded and they already knew that. So Georgie starts crying, and then we're going to go back to the house. Anne and George are tied up. Peter is flipping through the TV channels. We get to car racing, and Georgie's brought back in. He runs to Anne. The gang is all back together. All of our main characters are back together. Paul is going to give the hunting rifle over to Peter. Great news. Here's a weapon that they have. It's from Fred's house. Paul says, what time is it? Peter says, it's after 11. Paul says, well, we should think about starting to win our bet. Paul has exactly 2 bullets. Now, there are 3 people here, so that's inherently a problem for them, but they'll sort it out, I'm sure. They play eeny, meeny, miny, mo. The boys are smiling at this part of the game. They're doing eeny, meeny, miny, mo based on counting up to what they think Anne's age is. So they're going to guess her age, and she's not answering. They'd like to start with Anne. Paul's going to go to the kitchen for food. We're going to hear a gunshot from the other room, groaning, screaming, fighting, and Paul's just fixing himself a sandwich for all of this. We're going to now go back into the living room, and there's just blood splatter all over the TV and the wall behind it. And Paul's like, what? You have no sense of timing. How are you counting this? Like, well, that's great. They're spent. Let's get out of here. See you. Ciao. The 2 of them leave, and they leave behind. We don't know yet. We're going to take a second to figure that out. And when we do see the family, we're going to see Anne hunched over in a chair alive, a body on the floor near the TV, it's Georgie the son, and a body near the sofa, George, who actually isn't dead. He just got knocked out. So we're going to watch her for a long time. From the moment we go from the blood spattered TV to looking at Anne and this scene of what's happened to the family, from where we start that to pretty much the next real scene change is 9 minutes. 9 minutes where we watch Anne tied up, people motionless aside from Anne hopping to the TV to turn it off, Anne trying to figure out how to stand up, George sitting up, Anne hopping out of the room, George starting to cry, Anne now going back to George because she's managed to find a way to free her hands and feet, George crying, Anne crying. She helps him start to get across the room to go somewhere. 9 minutes for all of that. And the whole time you're thinking, they know they didn't kill 2 of these people. They're definitely not done with them. So how much time are they going to spend doing this? And if they moved faster, where would they go? And George is injured. So it all just feels so futile. We're going to get a long shot of the exterior of the house. We're going to see that the front door is locked. She's figuring probably the gate too. Only way out for her is going to be crawling through the kitchen window. He is crying about his son. He's way too injured to follow her. And like, she's going to have to go out to get help. She gets her clothes on. She gets her phone. It's starting to dry out a bit. It's almost able to work. So she is going to get a hair dryer to try to dry off the rest of the phone components. And you know what? George will take care of that. He's going to stay behind, try to get the phone working. So George is like, please forgive me, basically for not backing her up at the start of the film. Not that it would have mattered. Like this, all of this would have happened anyway, but it's something that he feels guilty about, knowing that things are about to come to an end for them. So the battery's too low. The phone isn't working. But you know, he's going to keep trying. She climbs out the kitchen window. We see her in the greenhouse. She climbs underneath the fence, and she is going to be at the neighbors shouting to them. George is going to try to call 911. They can't hear him. The phone's not working well enough. Anne's running down the middle of the street. She sees the lights of an approaching car. She's not sure if she can trust who's in the car, so she's going to run behind a tree. As it passes, it's a van. And she realizes like, at some point I'm going to have to trust somebody to help. So the van goes past, she starts to chase it. And then the next oncoming car, she's going to wave it down. So back in the house, George is going to cover his son with a blanket. He hears a sound. It's the golf ball being dropped and rolling from the front door into the hallway, into the door frame where we can see it. I wonder how they got this to stop exactly where they needed it. I wonder how they fixed the area to make that happen. George just looks at it, knowing exactly what this means. Paul comes in, he says, player 1, level 2. He throws the ball now at George. He says, morning, Captain. Peter comes in with Anne, because that was who was in the second car. Peter and Paul start counting to what they think Anne's age is to pick the next victim. George is like, the battery wasn't dead yet. Paul says, look, this isn't fun if you don't have a chance. That's why we're doing this counting thing. We're picking who's going to die. We don't make the mistake twice. It's, you know, it's Peter, just don't do it again. Don't make that mistake again. Where you stopped with your count, it's the one after that. Paul sees the knife that Anne left behind. Thank goodness, because they only had 1 bullet left. 2 people to kill. So this is going to make things a lot easier for them. Paul says, okay, but the thing is, like, it's boring when people who are mute suffer. So we want to entertain the audience. So he's going to pull out the gag from her mouth. He unbinds her a bit. He says, new game, the loving wife. Whether by knife, whether by gun, losing your life can be fun. So he's trying to empower her to make choices about who's going to die next and with what implement. And she doesn't want to answer this question. George is like, this is enough. Paul says, Anne, do you think it's enough? Do you agree? He turns to the audience for the 3rd time, breaking the 4th wall. He says, do you think it's enough? You want a real ending with plausible plot development, don't you? I mean, it's an interesting thing to raise to the audience, because we know not a thing about why these two are doing this, and we never will. And what they're doing, it feels like this family didn't stand a chance from the beginning. Neither does any family that they target. So, I mean, it's a good question for us, and one that they're not satisfying in this film. So Paul says, well, nope, Anne can decide. It's her choice. You know, what happens next? Little knife or big gun? You get to choose. She's not answering. He says, I'm being generous here. Hello, don't want to play anymore? Peter just goes ahead and stabs George. Paul's like, play with us. Anne's crying. I mean, I feel like this is something that you can't write this into a script. Naomi Watts is so not precious about being beautiful here. She's crying. She's just dripping tears, and she's dripping snot. And Paul wipes her snot off with his glove. That feels like a moment that just happened as they were shooting this, and they were like, we're keeping it. So the new game is say a prayer, any prayer at all, say it with no mistakes. Then that means God is on your side, and you can choose who dies next and with what implement. Same outcome, different game. Anne doesn't know any prayers. He's like, what? Paul says, where are we? He says, Tubby. Peter says, stop calling me Tubby. Peter actually only knows one prayer, and it's a very short one. I love you, God, with all my might. Keep me safe all through the night. So Paul's going to get Anne to say that one. She says the prayer. He claps. Well done. Now, that was just a test run. Here's the real trick. Now you have to do it backwards with no mistakes. And then same deal. You get to choose who bites it first and with what implement. She grabs the gun and shoots Peter and kills him. And then Paul, so angry about it, he hits her with it. And this is where you know this movie is rigged. Paul panics. He starts looking for the remote. He hits pause. He hits rewind. We rewind, we rewind, we rewind until we get to the part about the challenge of saying the prayer backwards. And at the point when she goes for the gun, he stops her. She broke the rules and failed. He knew what happened. He went back, undid it, and then stopped her in the future when she was going to do it again. So, like, no way. If they have this kind of control over us, the audience, and the thing that we're watching, and this family, Paul's going to shoot George. Enough's enough. The boys bring Anne out onto the boat. She's all bound up. One of them has a glove that's covered in blood. They have to fix that. So they're out on the water. Anne's reaching for the knife and cutting her bindings. And Peter's like, what are we going to do about this? Peter tries to stand to go to her. Paul says, no, you said you couldn't swim. Like, don't rock the boat. And it's the kind of thing you'd say that might give the audience hope, but we don't have any hope in this film. So Paul says, just bring the widow over here. I mean, to just so boldly say the thing so quickly, you know. Peter brings Anne to them. They're having this nonsense conversation about material and anti-material universe communication. Paul says, what time is it? Peter says, after 8. Paul kisses Anne and pushes her overboard. Peter's like, but there was more time. Paul says, no, like, this will make it easier to sail, and I'm hungry. So they keep sailing. They're discussing fiction versus reality. They get to the next dock with the people that we had met slightly earlier in the film. They're going to get off the boat. Paul calls at the next neighbor's house that we saw, and he says, yeah, Anne sent me for eggs. Remember me from seeing you with Anne? She's going to let Paul into her house as she goes to fix eggs. And then I guess technically there's a fourth time, breaking the fourth wall. Paul looks straight into the camera, and we get funny games written in big letters. And we hear that metal music blasting again. And the credits, after the metal music is done, the credits rolling are silent. And that is the film. Now, how do you feel? You know, I feel like this is less about plot construction, less about character development or relationship development, and more about how you feel, like evoking an emotional response. Yes, this movie also has a message that it's trying to create through the speaking directly to us. You know, it keeps saying, look, you're still watching this. You're in this for some reason, aren't you? You must like these games if you're watching this movie. So it's doing that, and it's creating as much of a negative feeling as it possibly can in us at the same time. And yeah, I mean, for me, it's just a feeling of real unease and just a feeling of being so angry at them. I have no idea why they're doing this. And I don't know that they're going to be stopped. Like, they have their act down to such a T that they don't, it doesn't seem like they take chances. It seems like they have a very, like, the same exact pattern that they do over and over again. And there are probably very few ways that it can come apart for them, and they've practiced this enough where they have a bit of control. And they're, you know, people are not, they don't have families in every house right now. People are staggering their arrivals, and they're taking care of the family one at a time. It's basically a day per family, and so there's going to be quite the body count at this lake. after, a while. And will they ever be caught? Um, and just the sheer politeness is so infuriating when, you know exactly what's happening. And I think that's also a testament to the acting in this film, because on the page, there's nothing unsettling about a lot of the dialogue, and they have to make it as ominous and unsettling and threatening as possible. And they are effective with that. Very, very effective with that. So that's what I thought about Funny Games. What did you think about Funny Games? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And here's something I really want to know. So my scary meter is busted. I have watched so many horror movies in my life that they just don't even scare me anymore. I'm desensitized to them. But I'd still love to know how scary the movies actually are to be able to make better recommendations to people. So go ahead, get your scary meter ready. Rate this from 1 to 10 in terms of how scary you think this film is. 1 being not scary, 10 being this is the scariest film ever, and anywhere in between. Let me know what you think about it. Let's see where we land with it. Next time, we are going to be on day 14. We're going to watch the movie Monster. Oh, no, sorry, The Monster. It's from 2016. It's a monster film. It's also like an elevated horror film, I would say, as well. This is our second Brian Bertino film. We watched The Strangers previously, and now we're watching The Monster. And so, if you liked The Strangers in terms of its atmosphere, I think you'll like The Monster too. But yeah, that's what's coming up for us next. I hope that you'll join me for that one. In the meantime, happy EEKtober. Get spooky, get donuts.